The day began like any other in Ouagadougou, the heart of Burkina Faso. The morning sun cast its golden rays upon the bustling city as life unfolded in its familiar rhythm. Market stalls overflowed with bright fruits and vegetables. Merchants called out to passing strangers, hoping to sell just enough to feed their families. Children darted between the crowds, chasing one another with laughter that seemed almost untouched by the hardships of the world. But among the noise and motion, there was a silence that could not be heard, only felt. A silence carried by the forgotten, the poor, the unseen. And it was on this day, amid the busy rhythm of the streets, that a black motorcade slowly made its way through the crowd. Inside one of the cars sat Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader who had risen in a time of uncertainty, carrying the weight of a nation on his shoulders. To many, he was a soldier, a president, and a symbol of resilience. But to him, in this moment, he was just a man looking out of the window at his people. The motorcade slowed as the road narrowed. His eyes scanned the faces, tired vendors, hopeful children, men carrying burdens heavier than they should. And then, in the corner of his vision, he saw her. She was sitting on the bare ground, her back against a crumbling wall. Dust clung to her faded dress, torn at the edges. Her hands trembled as she reached out to passing strangers, but no one stopped. Some glanced at her briefly, others looked away as if ashamed of their helplessness. Her belly, swollen with life, was the first thing Traoré noticed. She was pregnant, heavily pregnant. Yet her face carried exhaustion, fear, and hunger. Her lips were dry, her eyes hollow, and her arms wrapped around her body as though she were shielding not only herself but the fragile child inside her. At that instant, time seemed to freeze. For Ibrahim Traoré, this was not just a passerby, not just another citizen in need. This was a mother. This was life struggling to survive. This was hope, sitting on the dirty pavement, being ignored by the world around her. The car rolled forward slowly, but Traoré lifted his hand. The driver stopped. The guards shifted uneasily, unsure why their president was hesitating. But Traoré's gaze remained fixed on the woman. How can it be that in my own country, a mother-to-be is left like this? Forgotten, invisible. He opened the door. The people nearby gasped. Presidents did not simply step out in the middle of the street. Leaders did not pause their schedule to speak to beggars. But Ibrahim Traoré was not thinking of protocol. He was thinking of humanity. The guards stiffened as Ibrahim Traoré stepped closer to the woman. Their training urged them to block his path, to keep him safe, and to remind him that a president should never kneel in the dust of the streets. But Traoré did not listen to the silent rules of power. He listened only to his heart. The crowd that had been bustling moments ago fell into a hush. Vendors stopped calling out their prices. Children froze, clutching their mothers' clothes. Men and women looked at each other with disbelief. Is this truly happening? Someone whispered. Is the president kneeling before a beggar? Another murmured. But Traoré heard none of it. He looked at the woman carefully. Her lips were cracked, her skin pale beneath the African sun. Her dress was torn in places, and though she tried to sit upright with dignity, her body trembled from weakness. Yet her swollen belly rose proudly, carrying a child not yet born, a fragile hope wrapped inside her suffering. For a moment, the world seemed to blur. The noise of the city faded. All Traoré could see was her, a mother abandoned, a story untold, a human life forgotten by society's rush. He bent his knees, lowering himself until he was nearly at eye level with her. His uniform brushed against the dust of the ground, and his boots sank slightly into the earth. The crowd gasped. A soldier kneeling was unusual. A president kneeling was unthinkable. Traoré, softly, like speaking to family, my sister, why do I find you here, like this? Tell me your story. The woman blinked in confusion. She had not expected anyone to speak to her, much less the leader of her nation. She looked down, ashamed. Her voice trembled as though each word carried a weight she could barely hold. Woman, whispering, I did not want to beg. But I have nothing. No food, no roof, no one left to help me. She hesitated, clutching her belly with one hand, as though shielding her unborn child from the cruelty of the world. Woman, continuing, with tears welling, the father of this child, he is gone. Violence took him from us. And now, it is only me, and this child who kicks inside me with hunger. I fear he will die before he even sees the world. Her voice cracked, and she covered her face with both hands, ashamed to cry in front of strangers. Around them, the silence deepened. Even the wind seemed to pause, as though the heavens themselves listened to the sorrow of a forgotten mother. Traoré leaned forward, his voice steady, compassionate. Traoré, lift your head, my sister. There is no shame in struggle. There is no shame in pain. The shame belongs not to you, but to us who walked past without seeing you. To us who did not stop. The woman's shoulders shook as she tried to stifle her sobs. The crowd's murmurs grew into a low wave of emotion. Some covered their mouths in shock. Others wiped their eyes. One old man in the crowd muttered, "Never in my life have I seen such a thing," a leader kneeling in the dust to comfort the poor. In that moment, the titles of power dissolved. He was not president. She was not a beggar. They were simply two souls meeting in the raw honesty of human suffering and compassion. Traoré reached out his hand, gently touching hers. Her skin was cold, trembling. He held it firmly, grounding her as though to remind her she was still alive, still seen, still worthy. Traoré said, "You will not be left alone. Not while I live. Not while I lead." The words struck like a promise carved into stone. The woman looked up at him for the first time. Her eyes were swollen from tears, but behind them flickered something fragile yet unbroken, hope. That look, that single glance of a broken mother daring to believe again, carried more weight than any speech Traoré had ever given, more power than any law he had ever signed. The crowd began to move closer. Some women covered their mouths to hide their weeping. A young boy tugged at his father's sleeve, whispering, "Papa, is he helping her?" The father nodded, unable to speak. The guards, unsure what to do, finally relaxed. For they, too, were human. And they, too, felt the gravity of the moment. Traoré turned briefly to one of them. "Traoré, bring food. Now. Water, clothes, whatever you can find." The guard saluted and ran. The others stood silently, their eyes lowered, ashamed that they had not noticed her suffering sooner. Traoré then turned back to the woman. "Traoré, what is your name, my sister?" Woman, hesitant, softly, "Aminata." Traoré, smiling gently, "Aminata. A beautiful name. A strong name. Your child will know that his mother was strong, strong enough to endure when the world turned its back." Aminata wept openly now, her tears falling into the dust. But her grip on Traoré's hand tightened, as though she were holding onto the promise of a lifeline. And as she wept, the crowd felt something stir within them. For the first time in years, perhaps, they saw what leadership could look like, not distance, not privilege, but closeness. Not power above the people, but power kneeling beside them. The woman's name was Aminata. And as she sat in the dust, with the president holding her trembling hand, her story began to unfold. At first, she spoke in broken whispers, ashamed of her voice. But as Ibrahim Traoré listened, truly listened, her voice grew steadier. And what she shared was not just her story, it was the story of thousands, of millions, who carry burdens unseen. Aminata was born in a small village, far from the city's noise. Her childhood was simple, built on laughter, rivers, and fields of green. She remembered the smell of millet porridge simmering in her mother's pot, the sound of drums during village gatherings, and the stories her father told her under the starlit sky. She grew up barefoot, running through the dust, climbing mango trees, and fetching water with her friends. They had little, but in those days, little was enough. Poverty was present, yes, but it was softened by the closeness of family and the strength of community. But even the brightest dawn can be followed by clouds. When Aminata was only 12, her mother grew ill. A fever gripped her body, and despite every effort of the village healer, her mother's life slipped away. Aminata became the little mother of the household, raising her younger siblings while her father worked the fields. She learned strength young, not because she wanted to, but because life demanded it. Years later, as she grew into a young woman, she met Musa, a tall, kind-hearted man with laughter that filled the air. Musa was not rich, but he had dreams. He spoke of building a small shop, of raising children together, and of protecting Aminata from the hardships she had known. They married beneath the wide sky, surrounded by friends, neighbors, and the beat of drums. It was not a wedding of wealth, but of joy. For Aminata, it was enough. For a time, life felt hopeful. She and Musa worked side by side. She wove baskets to sell in the market, he carried goods from the village to the city. Their home was small, their possessions few, but their hearts were full. And then, the storms came. Burkina Faso, like so many lands, has known unrest. Violence crept closer to their village. At first, it was whispers, neighbors displaced, roads unsafe. Then, one night, it became real. Armed men swept through, leaving destruction in their path. Musa tried to protect his family. He tried to shield Aminata. But fate was cruel. In the chaos, he was struck down. Aminata held his body in her arms, her cries swallowed by the night. That night, she lost not only her husband, but the life they had dreamed together. She fled with only the clothes on her back. Pregnant, alone, and heartbroken, she made her way to the city, hoping to find safety. But the city is not always a place of refuge. It is a place of noise, of faces that pass without seeing. At first, Aminata tried to work. She offered to wash clothes and to clean homes. Some allowed her. Others turned her away when they saw her growing belly. A burden, they muttered. She cannot work. Days passed. Food grew scarce. She began to beg, not out of choice, but out of desperation. She sat on street corners, her hands outstretched, praying someone would see her as human, not a nuisance. Some gave her a coin. Some gave her nothing. Some gave her cruel words. She slept wherever she could, under awnings, beside walls, on the cold ground. Her belly grew heavier. Her body is weaker. And every night, she whispered to the child within her. "Hold on, my child. Do not leave me. I promise. I promise I will find a way." But the breaking point came the week before Traoré found her. She had not eaten for 2 days. Her body shook from hunger. She fainted once in the street, waking only because strangers poured water on her face. She was ready to give up. Ready to believe the world had forgotten her. Ready to believe her child would never know life. And then, a motorcade stopped. A man in uniform stepped out. And that moment, the moment Ibrahim Traoré bent down before her, became the turning point she never expected. As Aminata finished her story, the crowd stood frozen. Some had tears streaming down their faces. Others clenched their fists, ashamed that they had walked past her so many times, blind to her suffering. And Ibrahim Traoré, his eyes glistened, though he did not weep. His jaw was set, his face strong, but his silence carried the weight of every word Aminata had spoken. He finally whispered, almost to himself. "Traoré, a country that cannot protect its mothers, is a country that has forgotten itself."